Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Mic a little bit farther away.
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. Oh Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. Mana Mahana Tavaru Kama Payari Chakara Ankachama Karande. Mana Mahana Tavaru Kama Payari Chakara Ankachama Karande. Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. Bhavantam
Sing one more song, the Radhe song.
Page 362.
We'll see.
What a beautiful song.
Radha
Want to start? Jai Suparikar Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhari Kaviridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Radha Vinodhi Hari Jiyo Ki Jai Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiyo Ki Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai Shri Shri Bhagavan Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Paramahansa Astotar Sata Shri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Astotar Sata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Tadiya Tirobhav Mahamahotsav Titi Shila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshala Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Jagat Gurudev Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Saparikar Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Mahabhagavat Srila Gaurkishora Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Vaishnav Sarvabhaum Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Vedanta Charja Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhu Ki Jai Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai Srila Narottam Srinivas Yamananda Prabhu Trai Ki Jai Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Sada Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Srila Surup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Gaur Parsada Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sigoho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Dhama Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Govardhan Dvarashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dhama Ki Jai Shri Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Radha Gopinath Radha Madan Mohan Jiyo Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Radha Shyama Sundar Radha Raman Radha Damodar Jiyo Ki Jai Shrimati Lalita Vishaka Adi Ashta Sakhi Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Rupa Manjari Rati Manjari Adi Manjari Vrinda Ki Jai Shrimati Vrinda Devi Ki Jai Shrimati Purnamasi Yoga Maya Devi Ki Jai Shri Gopishwar Mahadeva Ki Jai Sarva Bhishta Pradata Giriraj Govardhan Maharaj Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Granthara Shri Chaitanya Charitamritam Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiyo Ki Jai Kshetra Dhama Ki Jai Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Shri Nrsinga Deva Ki Jai Bhakta Pravara Shikalad Maharaj Jai Charu Dham Charu Sampradaya Charu Acharya Ki Jai Akara Matraj Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai Or Ananya Shakamat Samuha Ki Jai Shri Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Tri Bhuvana Pavana Harinama Sankirtana Ki Jai Tri Bhuvana Mangala Harinama Prabhu Ki Jai Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai Shri Nityananda Mahajana Ki Jai Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Kuroti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarini Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Niti Namini Devam Divyatanam Shuchandavadanam Balarka Chelan Sutam Sandrananda Puram Sadeka Varanam Vairagya Vidyam Buddhim Shri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakta Lasitam Saraswata Nambaram Banditam Shubhadam Madeka Sharanam Nyashishwaram Sridharam Namo Vishnupadaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Iti Namane Namo Vishnupadaya Acharya Singha Rupane Shri Srimad Bhakti Pragyana Keshava Iti Namane Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namane Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nityanandam Namastubhyam Premananda Pradayane Kalo Kalamashanashaya Janava Pataye Namaha Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Nama Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali to the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Asto Tarasata, Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali unto the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Asto Tarasata, Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, on his most divine, transcendental Tirubhav Mahamahotsav Titi, his transcendental disappearance day. And I'm offering my Dandavat Pranams to my most beloved Siksha Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And my Dandavat Pranams to all of my Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavas. I don't know if these children are going to be, I think better that they should go in the other room because they're not going to be able to be quiet. So on this day, in the year 1988, my most beloved Siksha Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, he departed from this world in Sri Navadvip Dham, in his Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, where he lived from the 1940s until he departed. And he left behind a storehouse, a transcendental of Hari Katha that is unparalleled. Not I'm just saying this. Who also says this? His godbrothers. His very highly esteemed, exalted godbrothers, such as Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj, who glorified him in a Vyasa Puja offering And he told that the invaluable contribution that Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj made to the Gaudiya Vaishnava community, in English language particularly, he said it was something unparalleled. And that those words in the English language that he gave to the followers of our Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who came to him after his disappearance in 1977 for 11 years. For 11 years, he stayed on the planet, and he gave from the core of his heart his realizations. And Srila Pramod Puri Maharaj said that even in the Bengali language, he had not previously spoken as he did in English. Therefore, he said, his books should all be translated from English into Bengali. Usually it's the other way around. So, on this day, it's always a difficulty for me on the day of his disappearance and during Kartik on the day of his appearance. It's a very great task, very difficult task, to try to select, to try to choose what to speak, what to read about, which topic to cover, and how can I possibly narrate his glorious life and teachings. But nevertheless, it is our duty to make the attempt. Otherwise, we are not actual disciples. We must try to glorify both our Diksha and Siksha Gurus. So, usually I also tell something about my own personal experience with my Siksha Guru, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Swami Maharaj. And his life is so glorious. We have some accounts of his life in his own autobiography that he told. Then there's also another biographical written, like a very long essay describing what he accomplished in his service to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur while Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was present on the planet. Played a very, very important role. And of course, after the disappearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj actually continued to be a very essential spiritual force for the Gaudiya Math in particular, because he was renowned. He was renowned. This is too distracting, getting up and down. He was renowned in the Gaudiya Math as the personality who could actually give the whole perfect Siddhanta. Why was he renowned? Because even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told that about him on a number of occasions. One title that he gave was the term Shastra Nipun. Shastra Nipun. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave him that title. And essentially that means like a scriptural genius, a personality who is in the Shastras and the conclusion of the Shastras. And he also told once, because Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj was a very, very great poet. He was a very great author and poet. And we have the collection of the various ashtakams and various prayers that he wrote in Sanskrit language, in perfect Sanskrit composition. Just compare, some of the godbrothers have compared. Srila Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he compared these ashtakams and so forth of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj to be like Rupa Goswami's. And he used to sing them all the time by memory. Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj wrote an epic poem, more than 72 verses long in Sanskrit, detailing the life of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his whole life, in 72 verses. That poem is called Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram. Stotram means prayer. And Prema Dhamma Deva is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Deva, the Lord of Prema. Prema Dhamma. This is just one of his contributions. We can see in his book that he also published and wrote, which is called Sri Prapanna Jivanamrita. That means, Prapanna Jivanamrita means the nectar in the lives of the Prapanna. What is the Prapanna? Called Sharanagati. Sharanagati, the how to surrender. So Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj compiled various verses from all throughout the Shastras, detailing the process, how to surrender by performing the 6 limbs of Sharanagati. The 6 limbs, how to surrender. And he compiled shlokas from all throughout the Shastras in chapters. First limb of surrender, second limb of surrender. Many, many shlokas describing how to do anukulyasya sankalpa. If something is not favorable, you reject it. Then that is surrender. If you are doing that which is not favorable for bhakti, and you are also informed that it is unfavorable, but yet you continue to do it, it means you have no surrender. These are the criterion. These are the measuring stick of Sharanagati. Patikuli Vivarjanam. Rakshishyatiti Vishvasa, 3rd limb. That means Raksha means protector. Rakshishyatiti Vishvasa. To believe firmly, to fully believe that no one else is my protector. Only Krishna. No one else can protect me or anyone. Only Krishna. That is the 3rd limb of surrender. 4th limb of surrender. Goptritve varanam tata. Gopta. This is the central limb of the 6 limbs of Sharanagati. Without this central limb, there is no Sharanagati. What is that central limb? Goptritve varanam. Goptritva means the guardianship. This is how Srila Sridhar Maharaj translated. The guardianship of the Lord. What does guardian mean? It means Gopta. Gopta means he who maintains me. Is there any other maintainer other than Krishna? No. No one is maintaining anyone. We may think we are, but no one is actually a Gopta. Only Krishna is. He's supplying everything. Everyone, everything in our life. And everyone's life. every jiva in the entire creation. Krishna is the Gopta. When we embrace Varanam, Krishna's guardianship, then that is called surrender. Krishna is my only guardian. That is also there in the 26 qualities of the pure devotee. That Krishnaika Sharanam. Krishnaika Sharanam means only Krishna. This is how Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained it. There are two terms, as you've heard many times. Atmanivedanam. What is Atmanivedanam? It means to offer oneself. Atma. Nivedan. To offer oneself to Krishna. So, that is a exercise. My mind, my body, my words, my soul, my everything, my emotions, everything. Atma Nivedana. But in this verse, the term is used Atma Nikshepa. Atma Nikshepa. Instead of Atma Nivedana. So Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj explained that Nikshepa, the term Nikshepa, indicates a more forceful giving oneself to Krishna, more forcefully. He described it like throwing oneself to Krishna. It's like you dive off of something into the water. Once you've taken that leap, you cannot go back. And you have no other shelter except that water in that midway point. So, Atmanikshepa means to fully give oneself to Krishna, like hurling oneself to Krishna, to Krishna's lotus feet. And finally, Karpanya, sixth limb, humility. Humility. What is humility? Mahaprabhu told very clearly in Sikshastakam what is actual humility. You cannot imitate it. You cannot externally make a show. No. Humility is the deepest internal mood. And humility, it is also to the utmost extent that humility is there within prema. There's no such thing as prema without humility. Those who are on the highest level of prema, they have the highest humility. Who is the most humble of all? Srimati Radharani. I'm going to read Srila Sridhar Maharaj's words in this regard. Na prema gandhosti durapameya bho. I have not even a scent of prema, Radha is telling. So these are the beginning steps of how to perform pure bhakti. Our Gurudev also used to say all the time, pure bhakti. That house of bhakti. You must enter into the house of bhakti, and there is only one way to go into that house of bhakti. It is through the door of Sharanagati. The doorway. You cannot go through the wall. The doorway, and that is Sharanagati. So therefore, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, this was a main topic he used to speak. You can see in his books, in his lectures, in his darshans. In so many different ways he would discuss. And so that book, Prapadna Jivanamrita, is a masterpiece. I heard the story of our Srila Prabhupada when he was in Bombay, and he was giving a darshan. This story was told to me by the sannyasi, Prabhupada's disciple, who was named Akhoyananda Swami at that time. And later he got a sannyasi name from Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, named Bhakti Ananda Sagar Maharaj. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj gave him that name corresponding to his name Akhoyananda, because he requested from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, although he took sannyas from our Srila Prabhupada. So he told me this story, that after the disappearance of our Prabhupada, he was there in Bombay prior to the disappearance. Or wait, no, sorry. This is during his physical presence. He was there in the darshan with Srila Prabhupada. Probably it was around 1976 or early 77. And he said that Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees sitting in front of him on the rooftop, who knows the 6 limbs of Sharanagati? Who here can tell? So then none of the devotees could really raise their hands, but he raised his hand. Yes, I can tell. So then he told, one by one, first limb, second limb, third. And he got up to 5 limbs. And then he couldn't remember what the 6th limb is. And then Srila Prabhupada told him, and humility. He was feeling very proud. Yes, I know the 6 limbs of surrender. And then he couldn't remember humility. So then after Srila Prabhupada said that to him, he said to him, actually my god brother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, he has written a very nice book called Prapanna Jivanamritam. At that time it wasn't translated into English, you know. It was still in Bengali and Sanskrit. So he said, he has very nicely detailed in this book the whole process of surrender from various Vedic Shastras, collecting all the different shlokas together to explain the process of surrender. He said, you should read that book. Actually, it was Srila Prabhupada's sister, Bhavatarani. We used to call her Pishima, auntie. She, in her household life, she financed the printing of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Bengali Prapanna Jivanamrita. So anyway, so this Akhoyananda Swami, he told me the story that when he, at one point in the early 80s, he understood how very great offenses were being made to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And he decided to leave the ISKCON and to go to the lotus feet of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, which he did. He came to Navadvip Dham, and he was there with Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj during that early period when many devotees were coming and hearing Katha from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And he told me that after some time when he was there staying at his mat, he asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, is there any service that I can do for you? And then Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj said, yes, actually I have a manuscript which needs to be typed out. Some translation had been going on of the book of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, translation in English. And I need someone who, if you know, do you know how to type? Yes? Okay, then you can, here's the manuscript. So Akhoyananda said, the next day he sat down and he put the manuscript in front of him and he began to type. And the title at the top of the page, Sri Prapanna Jivanamrita. Nectar in the Lives of the Surrendered Souls. And then he thought, this is the book that Srila Prabhupada told me to read. And here I am, sitting here with my own energy. It's coming through my fingers in the service of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So, can those kids be told, this is not, they're going to have to go on the other side. Somebody should go and tell the kids that they're screaming and yelling over here. We can't have that.
We're going to close the window.
Where do you want them, Maharaj? The kids?
Well, they're right here outside the window, running and playing and screaming.
Okay, yeah.
I think she moved them. Looks
Yeah.
like. Oh, okay.
Because it's kind of hard, like when they play outside, to be just there, you know, in there. But
Yeah.
just tell them not to be on the courtyard, then they have.
Courtyard?
Yeah, like here.
Telling them not to be.
Yeah, not to be there. Yeah.
So, I want to, let's see, where to begin. I want to read from Srila Bhakti Balbatirtha Maharaj's biographical sketch first. So this is detailing about his life. Brief, it's not that long. Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar was born in Hapania, West Bengal in 1895. So he was 1 year older than Srila Prabhupada. The pastimes of his youth were spent in learning, and he naturally excelled in every subject that he took up. From his childhood, his tendency was towards the culture of faith in God and the study of the Vedas, Upanishads, and other scriptures. This is from his childhood. His tendency was towards the culture of faith in God and the study of the Vedas, Upanishads, and other scriptures. He received the sacred thread according to his family tradition when he was 14 years old, and his affinity for the divine world kept on increasing. In his early years, he was especially attracted to Lord Ramachandra. But later, when he came in contact with the doctrine of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he began to read Bhagavad Gita, and he developed an attraction for Lord Krishna. So actually, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar was born in a very, very high-class Brahmin family in the Gaur Dham, not in Navadvip, but in Gaur Mandala, in this village called Hapania. And he was extremely genius. There's so many stories in his life telling this, and very, very detached. So, after completing his primary and his secondary education, Srila Sridhar Maharaj entered Krishnanath College in Berhampur, district Murshidabad, Bengal. After 4 years of study, he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy. For some time, Srila Sridhar Maharaj was searching for a sadhu from whom he could take initiation, but he could not find anyone to his liking. Then, by the grace of the Almighty, Srila Sridhar Maharaj met his eternal guide and preceptor, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and in 1927, he became his initiated disciple. So, he had 10 years with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I remember him saying, in a very separation mood way, at that time in the 1980s. I remember him saying, 10 years with Srila Prabhupada, 50 years without. So, in 19 30. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur awarded Srila Sridhar Maharaj sannyas, and he bestowed upon him the name Bhakti Shak, meaning guardian of devotion. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saw in Srila Sridhar Maharaj the ability to perfectly protect the Gaudiya Vaishnava line from misrepresentation and misconception. In Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Sanskrit compositions glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur remarked, "Now I am satisfied that after I leave, there will be one man who can represent my conclusions." The Bhakti Siddhanta. Srila Sridhar Maharaj was recognized for his vast understanding and realization of the Shastra. And thus, his Guru also awarded him the title Shastra Nipun. This is what I told already, meaning one who is very expert or intelligent in understanding the meaning of Shastra. Not only was Srila Sridhar Maharaj recognized by his Guru for his advancement in Krishna consciousness, but he was also recognized by many of his affectionate godbrothers for his seniority. Many of them, such as Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Dayata Madhav Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj, and many others, they considered him to be Gurus. Once in a letter, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj commented as follows, quote, "What Sripad Sridhar Maharaj has directed, I take it on my head. He is my ever well-wisher. Of Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur, it is appropriate that I should accept his direction. I got direction from him that I shall live in this country forever." Now the context of this excerpt from the letter is that Srila Prabhupada was inquiring from his godbrother and Siksha Guru, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that what is the opinion of Srila Sridhar Maharaj regarding whether in his life he should be in the foreign countries in America, or whether or not he should come stay in Vrindavan and Mayapur like that. So at that time, this is more than a year before Prabhupada departed, he wrote this letter requesting Srila Sridhar Maharaj for his direction, his suggestion. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj told to him, Prabhupada saying, I got direction from him that I shall live in this country forever. So what does that mean? It means that Srila Sridhar Maharaj was supporting the fact that the whole Western world had been given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to Srila Prabhupada as his Prabhu Datta Desh. You know Prabhu Datta Desh? This is a term which means the land which is given for the seva by Prabhu, by the Supreme Lord, and by Sri Guru, the representative of the Supreme Lord. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj advised him that you have been given this land, place of Guru Seva. So it is also appropriate that not necessary to come back to Vrindavan, Mayapur, but you can stay there forever. Although it happened in a different way, but Prabhupada is admitting here that I got this direction from him. So Srila Prabhupada always was the well-wisher, Srila Sridhar Maharaj was always the well-wisher of Srila Prabhupada. There is a very famous conversation that took place when our Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj visited Srila Sridhar Maharaj's mutt, his very last final visit. And there are photos taken of that standing on the rooftop of Srila Sridhar Maharaj Prabhupada and a few of the disciples. And this was in 1977. At that time, Prabhupada was still in good health. You can see that he's looking still okay. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj, on the other hand, he had gone through a very heavy period of a very challenging illness at that time, and he was gaunt and thin. So when Prabhupada came to see him, Srila Prabhupada came to him and he told to him, we actually have there's a recording, audio recording of their conversation. And Prabhupada came and sat with him on the veranda there, and he said that, I have come to you because I am feeling a very great need to consult with. Now this is at the end of Prabhupada's manifest pastimes of bringing Krishna consciousness to the whole world. Okay, this is like 12 years after Prabhupada came to the West, distributed the message, wrote all the books, everything. But Srila Prabhupada told to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, I am feeling a very great need to consult with someone, but there is no one, he told. So Prabhupada was feeling this lacking of a pure Vaishnava, wanting the affectionate association of his pure Vaishnava godbrother. So then he said that I want that you will come and you will live in our temple in Mayapur. Srila Sridhar Maharaj was staying in his own temple. He was staying in his own temple, Chaitanya Saraswat Mat in Navadvip. And he was not well. And Srila Prabhupada said, I want that you will come and you will stay there in Mayapur with me. And he said, oh, Jaipataka, he's building a house for me there. And you can also come and stay there. And he described, there are so many persons coming from all over the world now. And they will receive so much benefit from you if you will stay there. And he said, oh, our Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted that you could go to the West and also preach there. But somehow it could not happen. But now all the Westerners are coming here. So it will be so good if you can live there. And he said, don't worry, Maharaj. He said, I will make all the arrangements. They're also building a lift, elevator. And you will not have to do anything of your own energy. Everything will be taken care of. Just give me the word, and I'll make all the arrangements. Then Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, from time to time, I will come there. Like that. So he wanted Srila Sridhar Maharaj to actually become the official president of ISKCON. This is all verified, all documented, everything. This was Prabhupada's desire. And what was their relationship? The relationship between him and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, when Srila Sridhar Maharaj came the first time, in Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, when they were still building it. And Srila Prabhupada received his godbrother and had him sit next to him, right next to him on the Vyasasana. It was a very wide Vyasasana like the one we have here. He was in red color. We have photos of that, where they're sitting together on the Vyasasana. And that was the first time that Srila Prabhupada was introducing his Western disciples to this Vaishnava personality. And then that was recorded. They're sitting. It's he's remembering all the times that they were together, how they lived together in Prabhupada's house in Calcutta for 10 years. Sridhar Maharaj would come and go from Navadvip to Calcutta for preaching. And our Prabhupada hosted him. He had 2 houses. He had one for his family, upper and lower floor, and the other, next to that, upper and lower floor, on the ground level was his shop, his pharmaceutical shop. And on the top level, Prabhupada reserved that for visiting. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to come and stay there very often, over a period of 10 or 11 years. So they're talking about, in front of all the disciples, Prabhupada is introducing him. This is my very, very revered godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. By age and by experience, he is superior to me, Prabhupada told. And, you know, he told so many things in that conversation, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj and him, they started to remember, oh yes, and this time, like that. There are so many times. So Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj was most intimate. We have to try to understand how intimate relationship he had with our Prabhupada, to the extent that even after Prabhupada took sannyas and went to live at Radha Damodar temple, Prabhupada kept on his altar in this little room at Radha Damodar temple a picture of another sannyasi next to his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's picture. And this was told in Mula Prakriti's book, because she interviewed the persons who were living, the family members who lived at the Radha Damodar temple and looked after, the Pandas. And one of them had this memory. They had memories of Srila Prabhupada. And he told that when he came and saw Prabhupada in his room, he asked Srila Prabhupada, oh, who is that other sannyasi's picture on your altar next to your Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? And then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, this is my very worshipable godbrother, who I consider to be my Siksha Guru, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So there's that conversation of Srila Prabhupada introducing him, Mula Prakriti's story in her book, directly coming from Srila Sridhar Maharaj remembering our Prabhupada after he left this world. And it was recorded and she put it in her book, how when he was living at Srila Prabhupada's house in Calcutta, how when he was living there, then one night, in the middle of the night, Srila Prabhupada woke up and he went to Srila Sridhar Maharaj and woke him. And he said, Prabhupada just came to me in a dream. Our Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, came to me in a dream, Guru Maharaj, and he told me to take sannyas. So now, Srila Prabhupada was coming and inquiring from Srila Sridhar Maharaj what to do. Prabhupada was still in his family life, but all of his businesses had failed, everything. And now Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is coming to him in his dream, which he had done even in his early years. Prabhupada also told that from time to time Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would also come in his dreams when he was young and businessman, family man, and he would also tell him to take sannyas. But now Prabhupada is at the right age and his life has been completed. And now Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is coming. Now you take sannyas, holding danda in the dream. So when he inquired from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, then they talked. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, should not act too quickly, should think about this for some time. What happened? A few days later, same dream came. Srila Prabhupada came there to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj discussed with him. And he also told him, it is better that you will take sannyas from Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj because I am very intimate with your family members. That's one reason that he gave, because he's intimate with the family members and all for so many years. If he becomes the one to give him sannyas, they will not like that. But actually our Gurudev said that's not the real. Srila Sridhar Maharaj told him, he says, I have given the sannyas mantra to him, and through me that sannyas mantra is coming from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati through Bhakti Pragyan, so it is very good if you take from him. But our Gurudev told once, during the Kartik month in Vrindavan, on the day of his appearance, when we were having a program, and he asked us, he says, do you know why my Guru Maharaj, the Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, took sannyas from my Guru Maharaj and not from Pujapad Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj? Do you know the reason why? So then I told that reason that I had heard that Srila Sridhar Maharaj said because of the relation with the family members. And Gurudev said, no, that is not the reason. Then he said he took sannyas from my Guru Maharaj because their relationship was extremely intimate. And their natures were very similar. And Srila Sridhar talked about his own nature. That he said, I'm a backward pushing man. He used that term, backward pushing man. Meaning, he did not want to be in the forefront. He liked to remain in the background, pushing from the rear, you see. But Bhakti Keshav Goswami Maharaj, as we know, our Srila Prabhupada was also a co-founder of the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, co-founder. And their moods and their preaching style was very similar, very lion-like, you see. So, Srila Gurudev saw many times his Guru Maharaj with our Srila Prabhupada. And he told us, he said that is not the reason. He took sannyas because their relationship was so intimate. Now it doesn't mean that the relationship with Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj was not also extremely intimate. It was, but slightly in a different way, you see. He saw him like Siksha Guru. And with Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, he saw him like intimate bosom friend, see. But they were all intimate. So when Srila Prabhupada came to the room of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, seeing the dream the second time, then Srila Sridhar Maharaj also, they spoke together, and then Srila Sridhar Maharaj says the next day, he was gone. Without telling anyone, without taking anything with him, he left. The whole history of how our Srila Prabhupada then eventually gradually came to Mathura and Vrindavan and took sannyas from Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj and was sheltered by our Gurudev in the Keshavji Gaudiya Math for many, many months. So all of that history and story is there. So the thing is that at the time of departure from this world, when our Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj was in Vrindavan in his final days, then the devotees, some of the leading figures in ISKCON approached Srila Prabhupada because it appeared that he was preparing to leave. Although I was also there. I was also there in Vrindavan in those final 6 weeks. And we would go into Prabhupada's room every day and chant kirtan in the background for him. And whenever Prabhupada would speak anything, then the kirtan would stop and then he would begin to speak and everybody would come around his bed. But I wasn't in the room when these leaders came, but I was told on the very same day what had occurred. So some of the ISKCON leaders, they approached Srila Prabhupada and they also requested from him to, if he thinks that it is appropriate, that he can recommend anyone to them, to his disciples, that they can take guidance from after he leaves the world. And at that time, Srila Bhakti Rakshak, Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you can go to my godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So this was printed by the ISKCON GBC after Prabhupada left. And also, after a few months, then there was the first Gaur Purnima festival without in ISKCON. And the ISKCON GBC met together, and they also verified that Prabhupada had said that they should approach Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So they formed a small committee, and then that committee, led by Satsvarup Maharaj, came there. That committee came there. Maharaj's mutt. And they approached Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Everything was recorded. And as the spokesman, Satsvarup Maharaj told Srila Sridhar Maharaj that we are approaching your esteemed holiness because our Guru Maharaj has ordered us to do this. From you. So we have come here and we have some questions we would like to have. We would like to have your advice to us. So then Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj began to instruct them on Guru Tattva. There were a number of conversations at that time and also over the next few years, for the next 3 years. The conversations concerning the questions of Guru Tattva were very important at that time. Why? Because our Prabhupada in the ISKCON movement was the only Guru. There was no other Guru. And Prabhupada was initiating everyone. There was only one Guru. And so it was a very new phenomenon that now there will be successor Gurus who are the disciples of Prabhupada who are initiating. And for the first time in the history, they are Western-bodied Vaishnavas. So they had many, many questions. And there were very many very important questions on the relationships between godbrothers, where one has become a guru, and like this. These are all very, very practical questions. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj gave so much advice. In that first meeting, that was recorded, and it's also in the book called Sri Guru and His Grace. And many, many of those conversations, it's all about Guru Tattva. If you haven't read this book, you have to read it. Everybody in the whole world has to read this book of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. I've been telling this for the last 40 years, that everybody has to read this book. And you know, devotees come up to me, especially when Vrindavan, at the time when Srila Sridhar Maharaj's appearance day is being observed, and I always give a class on Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and after the class many devotees come and they tell me, oh, you know, Maharaj, you told us to read that book, and I read it, and it's like a revolution for my understanding of Guru Tattva. And all over the world, traveling in Russia, here, there, it's even translated, I think, into Chinese. Devotees have come to me and said, oh yes, that book, Sri Guru and His Grace, made such a difference in my spiritual life. Only one of so many books that were made from his talks, from his darshans. So after Srila Sridhar Maharaj spoke with the GBC, they transcribed that conversation. Then they physically sent it by mail all over the world to every single ISKCON temple. And at that time, I was in Mombasa, in Kenya. I was there after Prabhupada departed. And I received this mail directly from the GBC, telling about their meeting with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and they had the transcript completely of the whole conversation. Now at this point, I'm kind of like I'm going into my own story with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but I have to backtrack a little, because the very first time that I entered an ISKCON temple was in 1970, August 3rd, in Detroit. And that very day, they had the temple room, small temple room in a house, and nobody was there at that time. So I went into the temple room and I saw a Back to Godhead magazine and I opened it up. And the very first article in that magazine was titled Descent of the Holy Name by Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. And I was reading that, and I was very brand new, and of course I couldn't understand, but that was recorded by Achyutananda, former Achyutananda Swami, who lived for 1 year with Srila Sridhar Maharaj back then in the late 1960s. And later our magazine has printed that article by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Actually, Achyutananda didn't have a tape recorder, but he wrote down in shorthand very quickly. So that was the first time. The moment I entered the temple, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So then, a couple of years later, 72, 73, I was in New York, and I was working on the press, and we used to play tapes of Srila Prabhupada. Many of them were just being sent from India. Audio tapes, and also photos and everything. They were just being sent because Prabhupada was traveling in India. And they put this tape on, and it was Prabhupada and Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So I'm listening to that tape. Then, in 1975, when I returned back from my first trip to India, I came to Los Angeles for the first time. And we were working on Srila Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was a marathon that we were doing. You've heard of this before, a 2-month marathon to produce 17 volumes in 2 months by the order of Prabhupada. So when we were nearing completion, then Rameswar, who was the BBT secretary at that time, he would always report to the whole society all around the world Prabhupada was doing, what he was saying, where he was going, because we didn't have internet or anything at that time, so it was kind of like our newsletter from the BBT. BBT newsletter was called. So it was posted on the bulletin board of the temple in front of the Los Angeles temple, same place where it is now. And we were nearing the completion within just a few days. So Rameswar had asked Srila Prabhupada, "Oh Prabhupada, now that you finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita, will you translate any other great literature? And perhaps the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're going so quickly, you may finish that. So will you do any other translation after that?" And he was suggesting to Prabhupada maybe the Vedanta Sutra or maybe the Mahabharata. And then Prabhupada's answer, I remember reading it, standing there in front of the LA temple. It was posted behind the glass on the bulletin board, right next to the entryway. So I'm reading it, and Srila Prabhupada answered to him, he said, "No, those books, Vedanta Sutra and Mahabharata, they are not as important to us in terms of bhakti as the books of the Goswamis, as the books of our previous acharyas. They should all be translated," which eventually they really were, eventually. Then he asked him another question. Another question was, well, Srila Prabhupada, what if, for some reason, you're not able to finish the translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Is there anyone else that you can suggest can complete that work, can do that work? Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. when he asked him that question, is there anyone else? Then Srila Prabhupada answered. He says, there are only two persons on the planet today who can write the purports to Srimad Bhagavatam in English language. That is myself and my godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So this I heard in 1975. Then in 1977, I'm in Vrindavan with Srila Prabhupada, and we're hearing that Prabhupada just told the GBC that after he departs, they should go to Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj for guidance. So, Prabhupada departed, 1977. Then, as I already told, they went to Srila Sridhar Maharaj after the next Gaur Purnima. They went to visit him, and they recorded his conversation, and they sent it to every temple in ISKCON. So now, this is 1978. I'm there in Kenya for almost a year. And I'm reading for the first time transcription of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Harikatha. And I already knew that Prabhupada said he's the one, he's the only other person that can translate the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada said you should go to him after I leave for guidance, right? And now I'm reading this. And when I read the Katha of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, then it was like, wow, now I can see why Prabhupada told that we should go to him. The depth, the incredible, Katha, it's so ingenious, it's so amazing, and so thorough, and so realized. Then I thought, yes, when I leave here to India, I'm going to visit him. So then 1979 comes, and I find myself in Mayapur. And so I had been wondering, I wonder where this great personality, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, is. So I was walking on the rooftop of that long building. Remember the long building? It was called the Long Building. So I'm walking on the rooftop, back and forth, chanting in the evening time, 5 p.m., something like that. And all of a sudden I run into my Bengali godbrother, who was named Subhag. Now he's Subhag Swami in ISKCON. So I said, Subhag, have you ever met Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj? Yes, I have. I have met him. I said, you have? Where is he? Well, he's just across the Ganga in his temple, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat. He is? Yes, I go there sometimes and visit with him. You do? Oh, I want to go. I want to go. Okay, we'll go tomorrow. I'll take you along with me, and we'll go and visit him tomorrow in the evening, like around this time in the evening. But one thing, you know that the GBC have passed some resolution that no one else except for the GBC should go to him. Understand? Only the GBC should go to him, nobody else. And when I heard that, that was the beginning of the nuclear explosion in my heart of absolute defiance against these persons. At that point, they were still dealing respectfully with him, but that changed later on. So when I heard that they have the audacity to tell that only they can go to hear from the pure devotee who Srila Prabhupada personally told everyone that they can go to. So I said, I'm going. So now, the next evening, we boarded, well, first of all, we snuck out the front gate of the temple and took a rickshaw to the Ghat. Then we got a boat across the Ganga, got to the other side and took another rickshaw. And then Subhag said, we should buy something as a gift, because to come to such a personality, you should bring something, not just come empty-handed. So we bought a couple of dots, you know, the green coconuts. And then we're going along on the rickshaw. And as we're going along, we're also passing by another temple, the Devananda Gaudiya Math, which is the very place where Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj's Samadhi is there. So we just folded our palms like this, and then we continued on to Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math. We entered in the front gate. And at that time, like in India, you know, there was always so many electrical blackouts all of a sudden, and sometimes it would be no electricity for 2-3 hours or even longer sometimes. So when we arrived there, it was the summertime. It was very hot at that time. It was like May, the month of May. It was very hot. So then we met one of the disciples of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, who knew Subhag because Subhag had been coming there. And then he said, yes, Guru Maharaj is upstairs on the rooftop, and he is being fanned in the open air because electricity went off, no fans, it was very hot. So I remember climbing up that very narrow, winding stairway to the rooftop. And in my mind and in my heart, I was feeling, what will it be like to meet another pure devotee? We had been with Srila Prabhupada many times, but now, for the very first time in my life, I am about to meet, verified by Prabhupada, a fully realized Mahabhagavat Vaishnava. What will it be like? And my heart was, you know, thumping. And when we came to the top of the rooftop, in the distance, in the moonlight, because it was like full moon almost at that time, and we saw his body lying on a bed, on his back. He was very old and invalid at that time. So he was just lying there on his back, and a disciple was fanning him. So then we approached, and I did full Dandavat pranams. And then I sat up, and I sat right next to his head, which was looking upwards, just lying there. It was about this far away. And then Subhag spoke to Srila Sridhar Maharaj in Bengali and told him that I brought one of my American godbrothers. He's not met you before, so he's come to meet you. And then he spoke for a minute or so in Bengali with Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And then Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj just began speaking, looking upwards. And he just began to emanate this incredibly sweet nectar, sound vibration, this Katha. And you know, Srila Sridhar Maharaj was very, very spontaneous. And he was already internally absorbed. Constantly, 24 hours, he was so deeply absorbed. He himself told that my whole life is to relish and taste the conclusions of the previous acharyas. He would relish their verses, their shlokas, all the different great personalities. He would be internally meditating and sometimes externally reciting these shlokas. So at this time, he began to speak of one shloka that is written by Bilva Mangala Thakur. No, sorry. That's a different shloka I'm thinking. One written by Srila Rupa Goswami. And that shloka, Rupa Goswami is describing the nectar that is there in the 2 syllables of the name of Krishna. And Tunde Tundavani Vratam Vitanote Tundavali Labdaye. There's this shloka. And he's describing all the sweetness that is in Krishna's names. And Rupa Goswami is saying, I don't know what is there in these two syllables, Krishna, because whenever I say Krishna, my ears, they desire to have millions of ears to hear that, Rupa Goswami is saying. And then when I pronounce the name Krishna, I want to have millions of tongues. And then when I pronounce Krishna, then the two syllables enter into my ears and they go into the courtyard of my heart. Rupa Goswami is describing. And they completely overpower all of my senses and they all become inert. Rupa Goswami says, I don't know how much nectar are in these two syllables, Krishna. So Srila Sridhar spoke like this for 15 minutes maybe. And then he told us that now we should go downstairs and take some prasadam. He was not going to send us away without taking some prasadam. And he said, you should come another time in the morning when I am fresh. And so we did come another day. But after we left that first night, and we're sitting on the rickshaw, and I'm saying, Subhag, that was completely amazing. I want to go again. You know. Now, as we went there, in the evening, we came again, we passed by the Devananda Gaudiya Math. So Subhag said, first, before we go back to Mayapur, we should pay our obeisances because this is the samadhi of Srila Prabhupada's sannyas guru and godbrother, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. So when we went inside and we went to the samadhi, so there was a small kirtan hall there, right? And who was sitting there giving a lecture to a group of Bengali Vaishnavas? Who was sitting there? Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. I'd already met him, actually, in 1977 when Prabhupada had already seen him because I was there when Prabhupada's Samadhi happened. So this is 1979, 2 years later, and I'm again seeing him. So we paid our obeisances. And then shortly after we left and went back to Mayapur. So then I came back a couple days later with Subhag in the morning, and Srila Sridhar sat with us for at least an hour and a half. I asked him one question, and he wanted to study Sanskrit. And so he came, and when I met him, he said, oh, you know, I want to meet Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. Because now the word was going all around ISKCON that there's this great personality, you know. And I hear that he's a very great Sanskrit scholar. So I want to meet him. And I said, oh, I can take you there. So that gave me another excuse to go. And the two of us went across and I brought him there. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj spoke with us again for at least about an hour. I remember at the end of that conversation, Srila Sridhar Maharaj told us, and we're literally sitting right in front of him. His chair, we're sitting right in front of him, the two of us. And he's looking down at us, like this far from our heads, and telling us Katha, and he was all of his hand gestures and everything. So then he leaned forward, and he looked at us, and he said, you know, that one time I was sitting with your Guru Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and I was lamenting to him that although Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada wanted me to go to the West for preaching, I could not do it. And I was telling this to Swami Maharaj. And then he told me, he says, that is all right. I will travel all around the world and bring all my disciples to you. You can train them up how to go back to Godhead. When Srila Sridhar said that to us, he paused for a moment, and then a kind of sad look came on his face. And he said to us, so why they are making this rule that you should not come to me? And that was like a dagger in my heart when he said that. Speaking about the ISKCON GBC, I just said, oh Maharaj, I don't know, I don't agree with that rule at all. You know? So that was the third time that I saw Srila Sridhar Maharaj. After that, for the remainder of that year, I was on a boat on the Ganga, and we were doing Samkirtan in all the villages bordering the Ganga. And then, after that, I went to England, 1980, and then, so that was 79 when I met him. And then 2 years went by. And in 1982, there's so much details leading up to this, but just in brief, then the ISKCON leadership made the ultimate fatal death blow mistake of officially banning this exalted Mahabhagwat Uttam Rasik Vaishnava. And that was very, very unhappy situation. I was in Detroit at that time, Gaura Purnima time, 1982. Sannyasis came flying over from Mayapur exactly before Gaura Purnima. From Mayapur directly, because all this was going on for days in Mayapur. I can't tell all the details, but sometime I'll sit and narrate the whole thing in the evening class. So, this great calamity happened, and then all those four, they began to criticize and blaspheme Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And when I heard this, it was like the most contaminating thing that ever touched me. And I just I refused. Internally, I wanted to just take bath in the Ganga. So after that, I still remained in the society. But I was very much in disagreement with this decision that they had made. And 2 years later, 1 year later, in 1983, I actually went. Again, I went back to Kenya, and I was the temple president there for that year, 1983. During that time, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's books, 2 books were mailed there by a devotee, Sri Guru and Search for Sri Krishna, Reality the Beautiful. And I read them. And then, shortly after, the GBC for that area came, Mr. Bhagavan Das, and I showed him the books. He said, oh, these books have come. He said, give me those books. He took them and put them in his briefcase. But I'd already read them. You shouldn't read these. At the end of that year, I went back to England. And when I went back to England, it was 1984, and I had been increasingly becoming very, very morose that this anti-campaign against this pure devotee is going on. And so I began to talk about it. I began to talk about it sometimes sitting at a feast in the Bhaktivedanta Manor in London and taking prasadam, and then I began to talk with my godbrothers that, this is a very big mistake. Very, very that the ISKCON leadership have made to blaspheme against a Mahabhagavad, pure devotee, who Prabhupada himself told us. I don't agree with that at all. And now I can see that the ISKCON gurus are starting to fall down one after the other. Definitely it is because of their great apparat. So somebody overheard this discussion, and then they went and reported to the GBC guru at that time, same person. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in Leicester, England, where I was living at the time. I was in household life at that time. I had just entered household life a couple of years before. And so then this devotee came to my door and said, Bhagavan wants to speak with you. He wants me to drive you down to London. So, okay. So then I got in the car and we drove 2 hours. And then I came up the stairs and he was there. And he had been, very often, he had been speaking against Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj in his lectures, publicly, in front of 200 devotees and this and that. And when I heard that, I could not digest it, I could not agree with it. So, what happened was, at that time, I came in and he wanted to test me to see if I was going to tell the truth. He said, so what's your program now? I said, well, my program has changed. I was going to go back to America, but now I've decided to go to Navadvip Dham and visit with Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. And I just stared at him and he stared back at me without talking for like 30 seconds, you know. And then he and this other sannyasi, Dristadrumna, they both started trying to tell me that I was going wrong, I was going off, and all of this. And they started to try to have some debate. Barely even allow me to speak. They would cut me off one after the other, And, you know, then at one point, he got up in the room and he began pacing back and forth. And he said, you know, Urukram, it was my initiated name before. He said, you know, you're going to regret because you're going to find yourself in the future so far from Prabhupada and Prabhupada's society. Because you know what you're doing? It means that now you will not be able to visit any of our temples anymore. And you will not be able to speak to any of our... And then the other sannyasi said, yeah, and we also don't want members or any of our folk members. And I'm sitting 18 years from the age of 18, completely given to the service of Srila Prabhupada in his society. I joined at the age of 18. And now, by the same person who started the temple where I joined, he's now giving me the excommunication. So it was a shocking moment for me. But I knew. And I was not afraid of that. Because I knew that they are really, really off. Very, very severely. They have deviated from Prabhupada. So then, after that, one more thing. So then he said, you know, I just don't understand what all you people who are going to him, you know, what do you see in him? What do you see in him? I mean, after all, what has he done in comparison with what I've done? He dared to compare himself to Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. At that 9 o'clock at night, and Manjulali, who used to be the wife of Jayatirtha, came to the door, and I said, well, I've just been kicked out of ISKCON, because all these devotees had also been excommunicated. So then she said, come in. And then from that point on, you know, I was persona non grata. And we would go out on Harinam Sankirtan in London on the streets, and then they would, the ISKCON group with the new devotees, new bhaktas would be coming, and they would see our party, and all the new bhaktas would be smiling, and oh, there's other devotees, new devotees, you know. But then all the old ones who are leading them, they have like looking down and scowling and like this. So I had to deal with that. So anyway, that winter I collected some money by selling paint. Family, the whole family. We went and flew to Navadvip Dham with a whole group of devotees on the airplane, 30, 40 devotees. And I stayed there with Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj for 6 weeks. And that was the second time when I was with him. And I felt so much shelter, so much. And then after that, we went back to England. And eventually I came back to America, and this is where I came. This is where I came. In 1986, I moved to Badger. And then there was a temple at that time of Srila Sridhar Maharaj in San Jose, which was started there. Very nice temple. And so many devotees. Pran Kishore was also there. Tirthapada, he would come. Some other godbrothers would come. And then, then I was able to go again to India one more time in 1988, in January, the same year that Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj departed from this world. And I got to have his darshan. That was also when I first met Gurudev. Before going to Navadvipa, Pran Kishore, he arranged for me to bring some money that he had collected to the temple that Gurudev was building. Srila Narayan Maharaj was building in Sevakunj Vrindavan. And then after that I flew to Calcutta and I went to Navadvip and I met Srila Sridhar Maharaj for the final time. And he was not well at all. But he still stayed on the planet after that until August. And then in August of 1988, we got the word, I got the message that Srila Sridhar Maharaj had departed from this planet. I held a program in my house, up in the trailer, and the devotees, I invited all the devotees to come. So many came. So those 3 different time periods, I had the direct association of Srila Bhakti. And his books, his audio lectures, there's so much more details to tell, but I had listened to hundreds of hours of his tape-recorded audio lectures. And at first, when I came to him, I could not foresee what a role that he would play in my spiritual life at that time when I first met him. What great mercy I received from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that I was able to have clear understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Without his mercy, I would not have been able to understand that. I would have been carried away by all the false propaganda like everybody else. But by his mercy, I was not. And my devotional creeper was saved. So, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, I've always been hearing his Katha and reading his Katha over the years and worshipping him. And I first really began to embrace his lotus feet as my Siksha Guru. And it was through his Katha. Although I had met him, as I said, in 1979, but in the early 80s, through his, in listening hours and hours every single day. I had 40 cassette tapes given to me by the temple in London, Srila Sridhar Maharaj's temple in London. And I was listening to them day in, day out, day in, day out. And his Katha just went into my heart. So, although my physical association with him was limited to these 3 different time periods. Just as with my Srila Prabhupada, I had, on quite a number of occasions, had his association. But the Vani, the connection of the Vani, is the main thing. Main thing. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Vani is so incredible. When anyone hears his transcendental Katha, it touches people's hearts so much. Devotees in all different languages, you know. We even have she's expressed to me how through reading the book Golden Volcano of Divine Love, she connected in her heart with Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. And there are literally hundreds and thousands of devotees around the world who've never met him. But they've gotten his books, they've read his books, and they say the same thing. You know, I've met many, many of them. And of course, the wonderful history of how I came in contact with Srila Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, and so many years of association with him. But in that society of our Gurudev that grew all over the world, all the devotees, all the disciples of our Gurudev, they all read and read the books of Srila Sridhar Maharaj and consider him their Jagat Guru, Siksha Guru, you see. So Siksha Guru is not limited. If you read his book, Sri Guru and His Grace, you'll understand how he explains the principle of Siksha Guru. Guru and Diksha Guru are one equal manifestation of Krishna. But they have different dealings. You see, but they're equal, identical. These are the words used by Prabhupada in his purport, 1st chapter, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Equal and identical manifestations of Sri Krishna. So I never understood before meeting Srila Sridhar Maharaj that I would have another guru. And even after meeting Srila Sridhar Maharaj, I did not understand that again I would have a 3rd Siksha Guru, or a 2nd Siksha Guru, 3rd Guru, in the form of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, but this took place in my life. By the mercy of Krishna, he arranged everything. See? So this is just my personal, story. I usually tell this story so that devotees can understand how important Srila Sridhar Maharaj is. Not just for that time period. His books are equally as important as Srila Prabhupada's books and all of our Acharya's books. His books are unique. And if anybody associates with them and reads them and takes that into their heart, they will develop very deep affection and love for Srila Sridhar. He helps us so much. Very unique. I want to read for many days so much of his Katha in my evening class. At least for 1 or 2 days, 3 days. I want to read his Katha so that we can relish. We already did last night the 1st chapter of Sri Guru and His Grace. We read and discussed that. So I just want to encourage all the devotees that Srila Sridhar Maharaj is the Guru of all of our Gurus. He's the Guru of Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj in terms of sannyas. He's the Guru of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Vaman Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Trivikram Maharaj, of Bhakti Doyata Madhav Maharaj, Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. All of these great personalities, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is the Siksha Guru of all. They all accept him in that way. He was the Siddhanta Acharya on the planet for those remaining years. No one else. He was the one. If there was any Siddhantic question in the Gaudiya Math, they would go to him. And he would resolve everything. Very harmonious personality. He used to talk about this concept of harmony. You see, he's a whole book from his lectures talking about harmony. And harmony in the sweet absolute. You see. So, that if they want to do themselves a transcendental, eternal favor to their jivatma inside of their heart, they should take advantage of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's books. No matter who their guru is by initiation or anything, they should take advantage of Maharaj's Katha, and you will experience something you never experienced before. Very, very special moods are coming from him. Very high level Rasik Mahabhagavad Vaishnava. And Gurudev told us about him. He was such high level. He was living in Navadvip Dham. Not like when we go to visit with the eye exercise, as he called it. Living in the Dham, the eternal Dham. There's one story that one of my godbrothers from Australia told me, because during those 1980s period, he used to go, his name was Braj. Later he came to Gurudev also. He used to go to Navadvip and reside in the mutt while Srila Sridhar Maharaj is on the planet for 6 months at a time, and then go back and then come back again 6 months later. And so he did this over a period of a few years, maybe 3-4 years. And he became the gardener because he had that skill. So he was gardening in the whole land of the Chaitanya Saraswati Mutt. So he told me the story that, because, you know, he became like one of the Mutt. Maharaj had a very special way of dealing with his disciples who lived in the mutt. If they needed to go outside of the mutt, to go to the market or to do this or to do that, they would have to come to him and report that now, Guru Maharaj, I'm going for seva, I have to go to get vegetables or this or that. So this Braj Ballabha told me that one time he came to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, who was sitting there in his chair on his veranda, deeply absorbed. And he bowed at his lotus feet and he said, "Oh, Guru Maharaj, I'm going to leave Navadvip now and go to Calcutta. I have something to do there." And Srila Sridhar Maharaj's eyes opened wide, like he was in a very deep internal state, and then he heard him say, "I'm going to leave Navadvip Dham." And then his eyes opened wide, and he said to him, "Navadvip Dham? Oh, Navadvip Dham is not a place to leave." This is Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He was living in actual Navadvip Dham, in the Chintamani Dham. And when he would speak Harikatha, he had a very unique way of speaking Harikatha, that he would speak for some time and then he would pause, and then when he would pause, then he would say, "Nitai, Nitai, 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 Nitai." And sometimes he would say, "Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol." Sometimes he would just say, "Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol." He was always in Gauranga Mahaprabhu's eternal pastimes. He was completely absorbed. So the treasure in his lotus mouth, during that 11 years after the disappearance of our Prabhupada, they've been made into many books. There's even a folio on the computer of all his transcribed talks and darshans and lectures. Very, very special. Inimitable. Unlike, he had his own unique way. So I know that all the devotees, they have some reverence and regard, very deep regard for Srila Sridhar Maharaj, because we're in the Sangha of our Srila, who also considered Srila Sridhar Maharaj his Siksha Guru. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj is also available for you, personally, as Siksha Guru. And when I would sit in front of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, I remember thinking, this is amazing. I'm sitting at the feet of the Guru of my Guru. Prabhupada considered him a Siksha Guru. And he's still living in this world after the disappearance of Prabhupada, and I'm able to sit in Katha. This is amazing. I would feel like that. But being just in the mutt, even without seeing Srila Sridhar Maharaj, knowing that he's up there in that room on the second floor, his mood, his presence was felt all throughout this, like, I don't know, it was like 4 acres of land inside of the... You could feel his presence, his divine presence, very powerfully there. So, there are so many things to tell. Now it is the usual time when we end our Katha. On these days, we go a bit longer, like an hour longer. So I've taken up that hour of time. But I want to continue in the evening time because this is his disappearance day. I have to do justice. So those who want to hear some more Katha this evening, despite the fact that there's, just a few hours in between now and then, you can come, and I'm going to read some really powerful nectar from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Really powerful nectar. So, Gaur Premanandi. Jai Nitilila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Tadiya Tirobhav Mahamahotsav Titi Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. The guardian of devotion, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai.